The dusty streets of Red Hollow whispered tales of the infamous Red River, a winding crimson vein cutting through the barren plains, swallowing the unwary with an eerie regularity. Sheriff Emily Hargrove rode along the outskirts, her steely eyes scanning the horizon. The sun dipped low, painting the sky in fiery hues, as if the heavens themselves bore witness to the tumultuous life she had led. A locket hung against her chest, swinging gently with the rhythm of her horse's gait. Inside was a picture of her family, her husband, her 2 children. Her fingers often found their way to it, a bittersweet habit that reminded her of what she had lost. Zyrax Tan, a name she spat with venom, had taken everything from her in a blaze of fire and alien weaponry during humanity's first bloody contact with extraterrestrial life. As she approached the river, an unusual noise broke the serenity, a gurgling, desperate sound. Her hand instinctively rested on the grip of her revolver. Near the river's edge, an unmistakable figure writhed in the grasp of thick, sinewy vines that oozed a crimson sap. It was Zyrax Tan. The alien warrior who had haunted her nightmares now struggled, his powerful form ensnared and vulnerable. His once proud armor was dented and tarnished, his talon-like claws scratching futilely at the parasitic tendrils that threatened to pull him under. Emily froze, her heart pounding with a mix of fear and fury. The past surged like a tidal wave. Emily was back in the settlement, the air thick with smoke and screams. Zyrax had led the charge, his squad obliterating everything in their path. She had watched helplessly from the forest as her children were vaporized, their laughter silenced in an instant. Her husband's defiant stand was met with cold efficiency, a flash of alien energy cutting him down. Now, here he was, the architect of her pain, at her mercy. Emily drew her revolver, leveling it at his head. The barrel gleamed in the dying light, her finger trembling on the trigger. Zyrax's head turned toward her, his once commanding voice now rasping and weak. "Help me. Please." For a moment, she hesitated. His desperation was alien, yet familiar, echoing the same fear she had felt on that fateful day. Emily lowered her weapon. With a grunt, she stepped into the muck and grabbed a vine, pulling with all her might. The parasitic growth hissed and snapped, releasing Zyrax with an audible pop. He collapsed at her feet, coughing violently. "Don't think for a second this means I forgive you," she spat, binding his hands with rawhide strips. Zyrax nodded, too weak to protest. "I never asked for forgiveness." She dragged him to an abandoned cabin nestled in the hills, her mind warring with itself. As she treated his wounds, Zyrax began to talk. His voice, once cold and commanding, was now subdued. "I was following orders," he said. "My people believed humanity was a threat, a violent, unpredictable species that needed to be controlled. You didn't just control us. You slaughtered us," Emily snapped, her hands trembling as she bandaged his clawed arm. "And I paid for it," Zyrax replied. "When I refused to kill civilians, my own kind branded me a traitor. They left me here to die." Emily's eyes narrowed. "So, what are you doing near the Red River?" "The parasites," he said, his voice grim. "They're not of this world. I was sent to eradicate them, but the mission was deemed too dangerous. My people abandoned it and me." The words hung heavy between them. Emily's hatred simmered, but the threat of the parasites loomed larger. If Zyrax was telling the truth, her town could be in grave danger. Reluctantly, she agreed to work with him. They prepared for the fight ahead, gathering supplies from her stash and modifying Zyrax's alien tech to suit their needs. As they worked, Emily couldn't help but notice the subtle changes in Zyrax. The arrogance that had defined him was gone, replaced by a quiet determination. He even showed her how to operate his equipment, a fusion of technology far beyond human comprehension. "Why help me now?" she asked one evening, as they sat by a flickering lantern. "Because your people fight for more than survival," he said. "You fight for each other." I see that now. The next morning, armed with a mix of revolvers and alien plasma cutters, they approached the Red River. Xyrax explained the parasite's nature, a hive mind entity that fed on emotions, manipulating its victims' memories to control them. They plunged into the river, the water cold and thick with an unnatural viscosity. The parasites attacked in waves grotesque creatures with translucent bodies and writhing tendrils. Emily fired relentlessly, her bullets finding their mark, while Xyrax wielded his plasma blade with precision. At the riverbed, they found the hive's core, a pulsating, luminescent mass that radiated malevolence. Xyrax activated his final piece of alien tech, a device capable of destabilizing the core, but it required a manual trigger. "I'll do it," he said, his voice resolute. "No," Emily protested. "There has to be another way." "There isn't," Xyrax replied. "This is my atonement." As the core erupted in a blinding flash, Xyrax shielded Emily, taking the brunt of the explosion. They emerged from the river, but his injuries were severe. Lying in her arms, he whispered, "Your resilience. Your humanity. It's your greatest strength. Never lose it." With his final breath, he warned her of greater threats in the galaxy, forces that made his people's invasion seem trivial. "Be ready," he said, before the light in his eyes faded. Emily buried Xyrax near the river, marking his grave with a stone. She returned to Red Hollow, forever changed. Her hatred had not vanished, but it had evolved into something more complex, a determination to protect her people from whatever lay beyond the stars. She documented everything, creating a manifesto to warn humanity of the dangers yet to come. Xyrax's weapon hung in her office, a grim reminder of the fragile line between enemy and ally. As dawn broke, Emily stood by the Red River, her silhouette stark against the horizon. The frontier was no longer just the wild plains of Earth, but the endless expanse of the galaxy itself. Humanity would be ready.